let's see here. Put it one right there. And then about right there. That looks about right. Well, hey, what are you doing in there? Oh, you came here for a tutorial, eh? Well, you picked a great day. We're going to talk about 3 really important things that happens right here in the firebox. And let's start off with number 1, firewood, number 2, fire style, and number 3, fire management. And we're going to do it all with our good buddy Alex George from Old Gold BBQ. So let's get it going. Back before we pandemicked, not quite sure that's a word, a fella I have a great deal of respect in live fire cookery specific to barbecue came down to visit our campus here in Georgia. His name is Alex George, and he's worked in some pit houses of some pretty impressive joints down in Austin, Texas, Franklin Barbecue and Valentina's to name a few. But about 1.5 years ago, I guess it was, he opened up his own joint up in Indianapolis, Indiana called Old Gold Barbecue, and man, is it fantastic. And today we're going to go back and revisit that conversation we had with Alex several months ago, talking about probably the backbone in live fire barbecue, and that is firewood, fire style, and fire management. Firewood is such an essential ingredient in live fire barbecue, providing flavor. It also doubles as the fuel when converted into heat, which also is then converted into convection that smokes the barbecue. Above the cut of meat or the rubs that you use, or whether you wrap with foil or butcher paper or don't wrap at all, comes the real critical stage of live fire barbecue, and that is how you manage your fire. So let's get going. And welcome to the new space. What are you cooking with now in Indianapolis?
I love the hickory. Hickory's probably got the most classic barbecue flavor of any wood that I've used since I've been in Indiana. But I've used some cherry as well, which I've really grown fond of. The little mix of cherry and hickory is really my sweet spot.
What's your go-to size, and do you have a few of them?
I definitely have a few of them. It all comes down to the different attributes of the specific wood that you're using. When I can get the wood that I want, I usually go for probably a little larger, like you were saying, than other guys.
Right.
But you need to be able to make adjustments on the fly to whatever type of wood that you get in that week.
What's your size to go inside the box? Length?
Well, when I'll set a split inside, I would like for enough space to have 2 parallel base logs underneath, and the top structure of the fire should almost reach the edges of the firebox. Typically with a 1,000-gallon or a 500-gallon smoker, about 15 or 16
About 15
inches.
or 16 inches.
Yep.
And do you have a particular on as far as the width or depth of the split, as far as like this one looks to be about a 4-inch by about 2.5 inches?
And again, it comes down to the specific wood. You're always going to be dealing with wood that's in different stages of curing, and for consistency, you got to be able to adjust on the fly. Spacing is very important, and all of that depends on the burn rate of the wood, and that comes down to the cure. So for the sugars to cure inside the wood, it's best to go at least a year, and that usually covers all your bases, whether it's cold or hot outside. Go at least a year, but what you're really looking for is for the outside of that tree to start cracking and splitting. That's when you know it's time to go ahead and get in there and go ahead and break it down into splits. And so after about a year, either standing in the fields or laying in the fields. Standing is best because whatever side of the wood is facing the ground is not going to be drying out at the same rate as the wood on top. So standing in the field for a year is the best. Once you see the cracking, sometimes it could take longer, sometimes it could take less time depending on the species, especially with like cherry and pecan. Those are going to take, a matter of months. Where with hickory, you might need a year or longer. The sugar content in the wood is going to need to cure and spread throughout the log. So you really just need to be patient with the curing. The faster you cure wood, the more of the sugars you lose.
Right.
So you want that aging for a year in log form. You're going to go through, cut them into 16-inch sections, split those down, and then you'll age for another 4-6 months usually, sometimes a little longer, but you'll just be measuring with a moisture meter to make sure that the wood is anywhere between 10 to 20%.
So you're just dialing up the process when you start using a moisture meter, so you have way more consistency going on here.
Absolutely, it's all about consistency.
What are we going for when we start building the fire?
Well, I always think of it as a perpetual sort of snake eating its tail, consistent. It's all about consistency. What I usually use is a fire style called the log cabin fire style or the square fire. Start with some of these thinner pieces. I'm going to use the thicker side in the middle of the firebox and let the taper go off with the taper shape of the firebox. That'll give me a nice level surface to.
Now, where are you building your fire inside the firebox?
I usually start pretty close to the firebox door.
See.
Once we get it rolling and get the coals built up, we'll slide that fire back. But for now, because there's no draw, well, not a lot of draw because there's no energy moving through the chamber, we're actually going to need some of the oxygen coming in through the door to help get that thing going. And these are larger splits. If I had some skinnier stuff, I might start the fire with that, and the spacing would be a little bit less. But we're gonna start this one like this. And we're gonna put quite a bit of wood in here, because what I'm trying to do is build a real healthy coal bed that I can go ahead and start throwing my top structure on. Really wanna get it going well.
So let's come back here when we got this thing established and maybe burn it for a few minutes. Do you have a game plan of kind of how you're going to attack as far as the wood you're going to use early on?
Yeah, I usually like to find my most dense, sugar-rich pieces because really in that first 3 or 4 hours, that's when you're going to be laying on all of your smoke flavor.
This is what dense is. Show people what a dense log is and the weight characteristics and what you want.
Right. Well, it's a size versus weight thing. A smaller piece of wood that weighs more than it looks like it should, that's density. Heartwood that's been slowly cured is going to always give you a better density, and that's from the glucoses and the carbohydrates and the sugars.
So we're checking in here on the fire, the structure. Alex, talk our way through what we got here so far, about 30 minutes in.
Okay, yeah, about 30 minutes in. This would not be a time that I would have meats on just yet. Still trying to establish a nice, healthy coal bed. What I'm thinking now is in about 30 minutes, I'm gonna need 2 base logs to turn and add new top structure onto.
And these are base logs here. So you got a base log there and you got a base log there.
Right. So these are what are gonna create my initial coal bed. So what I'm gonna do now is select a piece of wood to throw on the top structure in anticipation of turning those new logs into base logs for my sugar-rich pieces that I'm gonna start my cook with. So for now, I'm gonna go ahead and knock this front piece off, pull this out to the front here so it'll cast some heat back onto my new top structure. That'll turn into coals pretty quickly. I'm gonna roll this baby forward and find a piece right here that's gonna burn consistently with this front top structure in anticipation of turning those 2 logs into my next base logs. This is where wood selection comes in. So let me come over here to my wood pile. Looking for something a little smaller. As you can see, the size of the piece on the front is gonna be the partner of this log that I'm selecting now. So I wanna match those sizes up so I can match up the burn rate. I think that'll work really well. And then just gonna take this, place it right on the back side of the structure. Spacing about 1 inch and a half. At this point, I know this is gonna fully combust pretty shortly, so I'm gonna go ahead and shut the door down and just let those logs get ready. I think in about 10 minutes, this should be ready to turn and start putting meats on.
So you put that log, or your last split, you put in the very back of your fire structure.
Right, because the draw pulls the
Back
energy back. So as you add wood, you're always adding your new log on the top structure in the back.
Okay.
That causes the heat from the front top structure to cast onto the back top structure. So right now I feel like I'm getting really close to being able to put some meats on. What I want to do is establish a sturdy base so I can put some dense top structure in here, cast some good smoke for the first few hours of my cook. So I'm about to rearrange these coals, get my base logs set up. The size of these base logs, it actually is going to be pretty good to use 3 base logs because I'm planning on putting some big dense pieces in here. So all I'm really gonna do is try to move these bases into position without mixing up the coals too much. Overworking the coal bed is probably the worst thing that beginners do. So what I'm gonna do is get my spacing right on my base logs here. Go ahead and move these into position, and you can see I am sort of positioning my coals strategically, just getting it flattened out, evenly heating the base logs from all angles. And I want about 1.5 inches with this wood specifically. If my fire was moving really fast, I would do a little bit less spacing. If my fire was moving real slow, I would do more spacing. So I'll pull this chunk out here and make what I call a smile. We're going to spread the live coals in the front off to the sides of the firebox so that we can get evenly distributed heat all along the front of the fire, casting back towards the structure.
Now, your fire now lives about almost a shovel length, not quite, but inside the box.
It's gonna gradually move back just naturally. So I'm not too worried about pushing it back right now because just as you work it over time, it's gonna slowly move back. At times when it starts to move more than a shovel length, we're gonna make sure we're pulling it forward constantly, keeping it placed sort of a shovel length from the door. Okay, so we're ready to make our wood selection. These are gonna be the first pieces that we're gonna add before putting meat on. So I'm gonna go for some larger, more sugar-rich pieces because it's gonna cast a lot more of that good smoke that you need in the first few hours of your cook. The meat's only gonna take on smoke flavor for about 4 hours. At that point, it's kind of redundant. So we're gonna make sure we're using some good, dense pieces to start. We have our nice solid base here. I'm gonna bring these in, position my larger split in the back with this nice high wall. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna catch the heat that's casting off the front log. It's gonna barrel into that nice high wall there. Just so I can show you. The height of this log is gonna help to control the speed of the fire.
Right.
Just that
kind of
nice
baffling
flat.
it a little bit.
Right. And then the front log I'm gonna position with the higher side sitting directly in front, coming down, tapering down to the front of the fire.
Okay.
And what this is gonna do is allow for the smile to cast heat back onto the front side of this log, and these two logs will work together to constrict the airflow and to really help light each other up real nicely.
And they're pretty close together. I guess they're about
1.5 inches is the spacing I'm going with right now. So also I'm gonna use this pile of coals here to sort of come up to meet the edges of the front top structure and push it back into the fire to close off your airflow gaps on either side. I'll be moving these coals in and out of those gaps to help control the airflow throughout the cook constantly. Yeah, so I'm gonna do what I call my fire read, a little checklist that I go over. Open up the firebox door here, and I'm just gonna look, make a plan. Right now, I can see that my base logs have been decomposing. Looks like my top structure is holding up pretty well. I'm just gonna give these base logs a tap, and you can see they are pretty much done for on both sides. So I'm gonna pull this log forward just to get it out of the way for a moment and check the base logs back here, same thing. So we've got some real nice chunky coals now from these base logs. What we need to do is go ahead and turn our top structure and get our bases set up for the new top structure. So I'm gonna turn both of these logs together
Now, are you turning them together so you do less movement in the firebox?
Always, always. Anytime that you can consolidate your movements, that's absolutely what you want to try and do. So right now I'm going to go ahead and rake the side of the firebox to spread these coals out. Do that side and that side. And then I'm going to try to get my spacing on my base logs here. So once I get the spacing right, about 1.5 inches, I'm going to push my shovel down into the center of the fire. And what that does is it moves the coals out to the sides, which is going to help better support your base logs, and it's going to move dead ash towards the sides of the firebox. So when I go to clear on my next fire read, I'll be able to pull the ash that I moved out to the side with my next rake.
Now we're looking at our temperatures are about 265.
Right.
And you're doing this not really based upon the thermometers, you're doing this looking at your fire.
Oh yeah, because I know I'm thinking 30, 40 minutes ahead. So if I don't add now, I'm gonna have major temperature issues in 30 minutes.
Okay.
If I add now and my temperature spikes, well, I've got a lot of tricks to deal with that.
Okay.
Overworking coal beds, not adding when you should, those are the two main mistakes that people make that cause them to have major fire issues later. This is a very consistent process, and not adding is not an option.
Okay, so you're gonna add right now a pretty dense piece?
Yep,
All right.
I'm gonna stick with larger, denser pieces, and you really have to think a lot about your wood selection. The reason that I use these big pieces is because the consistent burn rate. A smaller piece of wood is gonna light faster, it's gonna burn hotter, and it's gonna go away faster. There's no difference between the smaller piece and this piece, except that this piece burns slower. So we're gonna go ahead and throw this on, again, with the higher side, and I'm only gonna add one piece to the top structure for now.
It's a pretty big dense.
Right, so we're gonna add this one piece for now, and I'm gonna keep an eye on my temperature. As soon as I feel like I need to get a little bit more heat, I'm gonna come back and add my next piece of top structure. So when I'm only adding one piece, I'm gonna sort of place this towards the front of the structure. And again, that's so I can control my airflow. So once this is placed in here, I'm gonna get my shovel again, and I'm going to make my smile and close down the gaps on the side, which is just gonna constrict the airflow, cause this burn rate to slow down, and give me a longer sustaining fire with a more consistent temperature. And what I'm doing here is pulling some of the live coals from the underside of those base logs and just pulling them out a couple of inches from the fire. And what that does is it helps to light the underside of these base logs and open up the airflow under the fire so that we don't choke out our coals. All right, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna stick with that. All I'm gonna do right now is wait for full combustion. I don't wanna close this down until I see full combustion, because otherwise I might have choked out the fire and I wouldn't realize it until it's too late.
Looking good.
I always keep the firebox door the same. I will control the plus or minus 5 degrees by constricting the airflow, dealing with the structure of the fire.
Okay.
So right now, my speed's moving well. Even with the door wide open, I can see that the flames are casting about 4 or 6 inches back into the chamber. When you start seeing those flames really reaching back into the chamber, you need to constrict the airflow, tighten down your spacing. That's how you control that plus or minus 5 degrees.
Okay.
So right now, I'm anticipating that we've lost about 20 degrees by opening this door, and I know that we need to get another piece on because once I turn those base logs, I'm gonna need some top structure to keep this thing moving.
Right.
So it's all about anticipating 30, 40 minutes ahead. You're not worried about what the fire looks like now, what the temperature is right now. You're thinking ahead, anticipating.
A little saying around here, because it's great barbecue we're after, this has been a huge help, at least understanding a process, if not the process, on how to manage a fire.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Thanks for
I know
having
you
me.
didn't tell us everything.
There's so much to learn.